Hello, and welcome to our spoiler review of Hereditary. If you're watching this, we hope you've done your homework. We don't like to be like teachers and assign homework, but Hereditary is one of those movies that...
This is fun work.
This is fun homework. And also, Roth and I have been discussing this for the last week, and we've been waiting to discuss it with you. So, Roth...
Welcome.
Now that we can speak freely, what are your overall thoughts on Hereditary? And then we're going to get into the nitty gritty because there's so much to break down.
There's so much to break down in this movie. I will say that even in talking about my overall thoughts, I will be talking heavy spoilers because I actually find that this is a difficult movie to talk about without them.
Yeah.
Also, I hope you got some sleep last night if you watched it last night. I didn't. I had to watch 3 episodes of Arrested Development just to calm myself down. So here's one of the things that I wanted to say that I was so impressed with. As this film is so well crafted, it's so smartly and it's like directed with a fine tooth comb.
Yeah.
It's so specific because it really does harken back to classic horror films, and I hate to say this because you don't want to give it this pressure, but like Rosemary's Baby and like The Wicker Man, in the sense that there is an escalation of events and there is an unfolding drama. Also, it's about witchery.
Which you don't know.
Which you don't know. And you don't know. And then the other thing is that both of those movies are operating on metaphor at the same time. They are really happening. The devil is really going to impregnate this woman, but it's also about the dissolution of a marriage, distrust in a relationship, what we are willing to sacrifice, greed, and all of those things. Hereditary is doing absolutely the same thing brilliantly, but in this case about a highly dysfunctional, damaged family.
Right, and that's what I love about this movie is there's very few movies that are completely different the first and second times you watch it, because it is about an escalation of events. And this might flip for some people, but for me, the first time I was watching it, it was about the complete and total breakdown of Toni Collette's character, of Annie. It was about her absolute descent into insanity. I was convinced the first time I watched it. I knew there was something going on because there were things that had been witnessed by other people that it's like, well, that's strange. So I knew that there was some kind of influence going on, but I was convinced that it was all being channeled through her in some way, that she was the key to everything that was happening. And what I loved was that that's not necessarily true.
Yeah.
When you learn that it's her son, that it's Peter who's really the key to everything that's going on, after you already kind of think that it's Charlie. And I love going back the second time that you're seeing, whereas the first time I was very wary of Toni Collette's character. I did not trust her as a character. I thought that she, through knowingly or not, was doing things that harmed her family, which she was through her own illness, as she expressed it, particularly the first half of the movie, that dinner scene. I mean, just I want to give her an Oscar. I want to step into that scene and just give her the Oscar for that scene alone.
Tony, right now, let's start it.
Yeah.
Tony for Oscar.
She's
Tony
got
for
to.
Oscar. Hashtag it. Get it on Twitter. It's got to happen. It's got to happen.
But the second time, I feel so bad for her because here's this woman who's mourning, who has been sold, and we'll talk about this in a second, who has been sold this story her entire life, that her family suffers from crippling, psychotic, suicidal mental illness and is struggling to cope with these tragedies. And on top of it all, these terrible things are happening to her family that she, and there is, again, the way that you said that it's crafted, when she's sitting in at the very beginning of the movie, when she says, "I'm blamed."
Yeah.
And they say, "For what?" And she says, "I don't know, but I am blamed."
Right.
That is what's happening to her this entire movie. So on top of everything else, on top of all this tragedy, she's being blamed for all this stuff that she didn't do, and no one will listen to it. It's everyone's nightmare. It's the wrongfully accused nightmare. It's just like, why don't you believe me? And her husband is turned against her. Her son is turned against her. She can't believe herself. Yeah. And you read so much more into her. She's such a tragic character the second time you watch it, whereas the first time she's almost like the villain. She's almost like the antagonist.
That's fascinating. I actually found her to be a tragic character. Both, I haven't seen it yet. The first time I saw it. So here's the fascinating thing to me. Just talking about the craftsmanship. That opening sequence.
Yeah.
This is going to go down in history, and I'm not exaggerating, because it pans in from the outside. You go into the dollhouse version, into Peter's room, and then here we are in Peter's room. That's doing so many different things at once. Often a movie will tell you what it is with the opening sequence. Black Panther even does that because it opens in Oakland and it says this is a movie about America through the eyes of Wakanda. In many ways. The point with this is, though, that opening sequence tells you as the viewer, and you realize, you connect the dots at the end, this was always about Peter.
Yeah.
The first person that we see is Peter. It's coming in from this omniscient point of view, which we are as the audience. We are the voyeur, and we're looking at Peter. But it's also telling you that, you know, when you're a kid and you feel like the gods are playing with you as if you're in a dollhouse, they are. Yeah. Because it's as if it's the elder god point of view, Paimon, watching dispassionately as this happens.
Yeah.
But it's also this incredible metaphor, the way she uses the dollhouses, of someone who is very dissociated, very disconnected because of the trauma she experienced in her family, who is trying to understand the world in a dissociated, disconnected way. It is the cold separation that exists in all of the relationships in the movie. Her and her mother, her and Peter, her and her husband ultimately, who is, frankly, I know a lot of people would disagree with it. I was really mad at Gabriel Byrne because I was like, even if your wife is having a nervous breakdown, you are certainly not helping. You are by calling the police. And I was seriously like, how is that supportive? She just told you you're the love of her life. Yeah.
Well, I mean, again, that's what I love is there's so many questions in this movie that there's no easy answers to because, again, and I think in a way, Gabriel Byrne is sort of the audience in some ways in this movie, or at least how I felt watching this movie, in the sense that, like, he's disconnected from it and, you know, he's watching this unfold. But he, you know, at one point he's just like, I have a son to worry about. She said, what do you mean by that? It's like, he's saying, like, I have to worry. Like, you obviously are going through something. And he's like, I have to worry about our son. And are you harming him or are you not harming him? So I found him to be, I love that he wasn't perfect.
Yes.
And, you know, there are parts where I think that he indulged her and was just like, okay, go sleep in the treehouse. If that's what you got to do, that's what you got to do. But at the same time, toward the end, I felt like he's a tragic character in the sense that his decision to not do this anymore led to his own demise, and he was the only expendable person in that entire scenario, and it showed because he was disposed of like that.
Even though the entire family had to be there in order to call Charlie back in. But you're right in the sense I felt that about Gabriel Byrne, but I also had deep compassion for him for how overwhelming that experience would be, because what Ari Aster has done is given us very complicated characters in this movie, as well as, and this is the thing that I was impressed with too, just tonally, it does feel like these classic slow burn films. He says he pointedly wanted, and this is what we talked about right when we came out. Wow, that was a family tragedy that became a horror movie really fast,
real quick,
like that quick. Escalated quickly, But that's exactly what he wanted to do, which in a way is very much like those previous films. But also, there are moments in there that are so well constructed because they're funny. They're funny because he understands the genre that he's in. And even though he's making a movie that is fundamentally about people sacrificing their humanity, about people wanting to give away their humanity or having it ripped from them because it's very painful to be human, the behavior is so human. That's what makes it funny. Like when she's talking to her son, well, did you ask your sister? That tone is so relatable.
Yeah.
And people don't do that in movies.
They don't. It's these little just family dynamic things, which you see that then torn apart.
So The Babadook was a movie that by the end of it, I felt operated 100% on metaphor, and that it was about a little boy trying to understand his mother who was mentally ill.
Yes.
This is a movie that flips it on his head because back in the day, mental illness was considered demon possession.
Right.
And I feel like he's saying this is both a metaphor for families that do suffer with mental illness.
Yeah.
And actually, in this one case, it's demon possession.
Well, yeah, that's what I love is, again, I've seen it twice now, and the first time you're approaching it from the thing of mental illness and the great irony of, and again, it's they talk about, there's the scene in the classroom where at the very beginning, which is kind of played for comedy and smartly, because I love movies that have important scenes and they don't tell you that they're important scenes. I think it's the first scene in the classroom with Peter when he's like looking at the girl and he's talking about tragedy and like, is it more tragic that he has a choice or is it more tragic that he doesn't have a choice?
Yes.
And that plays into this whole thing, which is that, and the name of the movie, Hereditary, the fact that Hereditary, you think the first time it refers to this illness, this mental illness, and no, it refers to this line, this bloodline, this family has been groomed, cursed to be the host of this thing that's improving. And one of the brilliant things about this film is that it's a film that is very much about mental illness in the sense of thematically and metaphorically and symbolically. But watching it again, the irony of it is I don't think that anyone in this film is actually mentally ill.
They are
even the
possessed.
people that Annie talks to, and that's where, you know, I guess we can start going into the details a little bit more, but looking at her family, and she gives that monologue. My father was psychotically mentally ill. He starved himself to death when I was born. My brother hanged himself because he said my mother was trying to put people in his head. Well, she was, and he wasn't mentally ill. Their mother was trying to put a demon inside of him, and he couldn't take it anymore. My mother had dissociative identity disorder. Well, she also had something clanging around up there, and also this idea that you know, she would get this information from her mother because her mother was covering her tracks.
Yeah.
Why these people kept dying, what was happening to her family. It wasn't mental illness. It was her trying to keep this thing put onto a new host. We'll talk about how she took that out on Annie's family. But even her father, I was trying to figure out, and I love movies that you can theorize and stuff. I have two theories about her father. One of them is that perhaps he was a sacrifice that was required. Another theory that I want to look into, and I tried to dig into in the movie and maybe watching it 3 or 4 more times, but maybe her father was the host of Payman, had the demon, and starved himself to literally get this demon out of him. And it then imprinted on her mother, who tried to pass it on to her family. Yeah. That didn't work, so now she's trying to pass it on to her grandchildren. But that's what I love, is that there are no easy answers. You can speculate about all these things, but I love the fact that it's a movie very much about mental illness, but it's also about a woman being told that she is mentally ill, and she's not.
And the other thing about the idea of hereditary is that a lot of times when mental illness is in a family, the greatest fear that the children have is that they will inherit it. And that Marilyn Monroe was a case of that. It was her biggest fear, and she almost manifested it as a result, because this is a movie also about how your family traps you, and your lineage, in a way. You carry the weight of it. But I will say, with the dad, I picked up on that too, and the brother, and then at the end you're thinking, oh yeah, she absolutely did try to possess you with people, and that's why you were considered schizophrenic. She's dissociated because she is a woman who has, look, you have to think, if you're the leader of a demon cult, that you have given away something of your humanity. You literally have sacrificed a piece of it, and you no longer are whole. And you would read as very dissociative. And the dollhouse is also, again, a metaphor for the idea that they don't have any agency. That they are being toyed with this whole time.
And it goes back to the classroom.
And it goes,
tragedy.
Yeah, tragedy. That is the tragedy, that they have no agency. There's no way around this. The mother even tells her there's big sacrifices ahead, but it'll be worth it. What's crazy to me is so they all lose their heads, right? Charlene loses her head in the end.
Beheading is such a big,
Right. Well, where does mental illness live? It lives in our minds. And so at the end of this movie, you know, you're thinking, like, this woman is the mother, who's the leader of the cult. God, she has done all of this, and they have done all of this and sacrificed her own humanity, her soul, her family, everything for money. There's that picture of her with gold coins. And
the book that says, when it says the conqueror will receive great wishes, and it's this person sitting on this big thing, and it's this idea of if you're able to get this demon, and she was revered, obviously, as this great figure.
But maybe what she's really also doing is freeing them of this curse. You know, it's I know it's like paradoxical. It's like they are relieved of the very thing that is causing them so much pain in this mental illness, or what we don't believe was really mental illness, but as a metaphor, that curse of mental illness. And in this case, you know, how much of the soul of the being is left, because that final moment, they refer to Payman also as Charlie.
Right. Well, because Charlie was the vehicle for Payman, which, again...
So how much do they merge?
Right. And I think that's part of it, is they say at the end, they address Peter, they say, Charlie, you're fine now. We've corrected your first imperfect female body.
Yeah.
And so that goes back into, again, if you like, that's a moment where you're going back, you rewrite the whole thing. Go back to one of the first scenes between Charlie and Toni Collette, where they're talking in bed, and she's talking about her grandmother. It's like, your grandmother... she loved you so much. She wouldn't even let me feed you. She would push me out of the way.
She was trying to make him Charlie.
Right. One of the miniatures she has is her breastfeeding Charlie, and her mother standing there also with her breast out, like reaching for the child. And you see that, like, and setting up the whole thing. My husband wouldn't let me talk to my mother. When I had my first kid, there was a no contact rule, but I let her back in when I had my second. And this whole thing of, like, they need somebody that's the most vulnerable person in the family.
Yeah.
She was kept away from the male heir of the family. She tried to impart it onto this child, this girl, which is not the vessel that this demon needs.
Right.
And so we'll get to it, Charlie's demise and how much of that was an accident.
Well, the
Probably
symbol
none
was
of it.
on the pole.
The symbol was on the pole,
Yeah.
and anyway, I'm getting so much to talk about. I love this movie so much. But this idea of like, she was breeding basically these children. When she talks to her kid and says, I didn't want to be your mother, but she pressured me.
But that's what's crazy and very cool about the movie, is that I think it can continually run. It does two things at once.
Yeah.
The whole movie, but it's very modern. It's very classic. It's also metaphor. It's also actually happening the entire time, because all she had to do was keep her crazy mother away from her kids. But
Right.
the truth is, when you grow up in a very, very dysfunctional family, it brings with it a lot of painful guilt and confusion. That's why she's saying, I was blamed. She's feeling this shame. I didn't know what to do. All of the buried feelings. I didn't want to have you even. I didn't want to have these kids. But she made me. If she had cut off the hereditary line and not felt pressured to have the kids that, yes, she then did love, none of this would happen. However, she's so wrapped up in the web of mania that her mother created that she still allows her to groom her child to be taken over by a demon.
Right.
You
and
know?
even Charlie says
Not
she wanted
knowing
me
that, but still.
She wanted me to be a boy. Like, the fact that the grandmother was not particularly sly about what she was doing, not to Charlie anyway. She would tell Charlie, I wish you were a boy.
Yeah, and she was in Toni Collette's character is in such incredible denial, because I'm sorry, no matter what, your mother breastfeeding your child, your infant, is weird. And the fact that you just push that aside talks to the level of disconnect that's happening for this family, because all she had to do is be like, nah, man. But instead, and she had this weird daughter who she sent to a party knowing that is not where she would want to be.
Yeah.
You know? So she's just continuing to force denial.
I am blamed.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Charlie.
Yeah.
Because
Charlie.
there are certain things that are planted, because a lot of the question I have is, what was the cult directly responsible for? What was kind of Payman's just sort of spiritual influence, and and I think the biggest intersection of those two is Charlie, because you mentioned they're driving to the party, they drive by the pole that will eventually be the pole where Charlie loses her head. It's got the symbol painted on it, which I think means that it was targeted by either the cult, I think, or Payman as a site of great importance. Eating the eating of the cake. Was that something that it would suggest, you would think, oh, that's a tragic accident. But if they know that this is going to be something that happens, is it an accident? Is Payman influencing Charlie to do that?
Oh, to eat the cake?
To eat the cake, because knowing that, because the thing that I think that clears it up a little bit, as far as, did the cult know that they were going to be driving down that road, is... There's a shot at the end of the movie as Peter's walking up toward the treehouse, where you see the family dog, poor doggy, laying in the yard. And it seems like an odd shot, but to me it harkens back to the reason that he swerved off the road was that there was an animal that jumped into the road, that was laying in the road in the path of the car, that caused him to swerve and hit that pole, which to me says, at least partially, the cult had orchestrated this entire thing, that they had planned for this to happen, that this needed to happen in order to complete the ritual, to get the person that they really wanted.
Yeah.
I think what's more in the air beyond that is to what degree was Charlie in control of her actions there, and to what degree was that an accident, again, a choice or not a choice, a tragedy.
The other thing is that Payman is clearly a part of her, right? Because she's already doing this. She's already like clearly been. How long he was a part of her? Maybe when she was a kid and it just hasn't been a good fit for him, you know. And he's been uncomfortable in her form the whole time because when Peter starts to say, I feel like I'm choking, at first I thought it was, he feels so guilty about what happened to his sister, so now he feels like he's choking too. Or maybe he was starting to be taken over, and that's one of the manifestations is they can't breathe, and maybe she's actually not allergic to anything, but she is having this reaction where some part of Charlie is still fighting for dominance. That's the one thing that's like an open question for me that's fascinating. What part of that, when do they just fully go away?
Well, one of the shots that I was curious about was there's a shot where she's sitting there, because her clicking, the only time she really does it is when she's either drawing or making her little animal, or she's got the head in her hand and she has a vision. Like that's when you see the demon kind of manifest within her, and that's kind of the sound of the presence of that's the the clickety clack of the Babadook and everything else is that sound. And she's sitting there at the party working on that thing, working on that little statue thing that she's making, which again the movie has said that when she's doing things like that, that is Payman at least partially being present. So that to me says like that she was partially inhabited by this being. But the other thing, and the allergy thing, which I wonder, is there's the scene where she's working on the thing on her table and she's eating little chocolate things, and I'm wondering, like, this is how minor that they're crunching, and that to me is just like, are there nuts in that? And is that a sign that like she doesn't have an allergy?
Exactly.
This is just again a manifestation of this demon, and it will cause this reaction, which again will cause them to leave, which. It's where does it, and you don't need these answers. That's the fun part. It's talking out the movie and figuring out where does the demon end and the cult begin. And to what degree were people in charge of anything? Yeah,
because the movie is presenting questions that have no answers. You know, like how much of our life really is in our control and how much is really, really passed down, how much is predetermined, how much is encoded in our DNA even. It just goes to a really devilish witchery place. And those figures, the other interesting thing about her making those little weird Wicker
I have
Man,
one that they
like,
sent us that I forgot to bring. I was going to bring.
Creepy. I have one too.
I know. It's not real, thankfully. It's plastic.
Yeah, no, they sent it to my house and I was like, oh.
They sent it to your house. So thankfully they sent it to our office. So I should have brought it and put it on the thing here. But
her mother's an artist too. Speaking of Hereditary, and like there is this idea of the art being the way that you release your demons. But that it's also like akin to madness. So that's a little bit in there as well. I'm all about the metaphors in this movie, as you can tell. Let's talk about some of the brass tacks of what was set up. When the grandmother appears to her and when she gets this message about the sacrifices being worth it, here's one of my big questions. I was left going, well, what are you getting out of this? They're going to be rich. You're all dead. Is it that is there some kingdom beyond for them as well, that now she feels like her family, okay, we sacrificed a lot, but now we're together in the afterlife and we're just bawling. It's like Big Pimpin' Afterlife.
I took it as, what she said, because that was another thing that my second viewing, I looked at the note that it left. And it was like, I'm sorry for all the things that I can't tell you. Please don't despair. The sacrifices to come, not what you've already sacrificed. Don't despair the sacrifices that are coming. It's all going to be worth it. Which again, I think feeds into the whole thing with Charlie of like that poor girl was marked for death from
day one.
From day one. She knew that family was going to have to be torn apart. But I think again that is the nature of this thing is like great riches. It's like there's a reward for this, and you're going to be rewarded. Not so much your husband. Again, once he serves his role, which is like being part of the family to summon I want to talk about that ritual. He's gone, but this idea of like this family, myself included, we will all share. I mean, in a way, at the end, the whole family's reunited.
Well, they
Grandma's
are.
there.
Grandma's there.
Charlie's head is up there on the
Yeah.
thing with the crown. Mom's bowing. They're both bowing down. Peter's there. The whole family's back together.
But is that the implication that they're having this reward in the afterlife? I mean, that's a very Christian implication.
I think the implication is actually,
you know, whatever it is.
I took it as the reward was the return of payment.
Right.
That's the goal of any cult is to bring this demon back. So I took it as the reward was the return of payment, and they are blessed to be his disciples to facilitate his return to Earth.
You know, the other interesting thing about that though is like, yeah, I don't know. I think you could read it either way because that's a way too much to give up so that some other people get that reward. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like you have to imagine that she would have at least believed, whether it was true or not, that they were going to reap some of those benefits.
Maybe, but I mean, her whole certainly a
Or
lot
that
of
your
her
son
life
is
was
crowned as
devoted
king.
to this cult. It's the honor of being of having served this being.
I guess that's true, and that's even like
It's
families
deified.
that are sacrificing and sacrificing and sacrificing in the name of crowning one of their kids as royalty times 10 million. Yeah, I mean it's a really fascinating thing because why?
Yeah.
You know, and also the idea like she's going through her mom's boxes, unearthing her secrets when she appears, and you know what? It reminded me of the scene that she has where she's telling the truth to Peter in the dream. I never wanted to be your mother.
Right.
That moment of relief, but I said it. Some family secrets ought to stay secret. We don't need to know everything.
Yeah. Well, and that I know a lot of people say like, well, she's not mentally ill, then why does she tell the whole story about covering herself in paint thinner and covering her kids in paint thinner? And I think that all again ties back to her father and this idea of maybe her father had the same was going through the same experience and had this kind of subconscious thing of like, I have to get out of this situation. I can't be party to this anymore. And maybe it is a subconscious thing of like she knew something was wrong and she was trying to spare herself and her
then the
children
future pain.
from this thing.
And maybe she was trying to stop a demon from being unleashed into
Exactly,
the world.
yeah,
because now
exactly.
it's made manifest subconsciously. You know what? I'm going to reverse what I just said, which is that I guess unearthing those secrets can be initially very, very painful, but maybe ultimately freeing, because had she really understood what those impulses were,
Maybe she would have not blown that match out.
Yeah.
Speaking of characters that you see differently, both times you see the movie, Joan,
Oh,
who is such a sympathetic character.
and out.
And Dowd, such a sympathetic character, it seems like. And again, it's laying the seeds from the very beginning at the funeral when she says, "My mother was a private woman. I'm surprised at this turnout."
Yeah.
You know, that seems like kind of a throwaway line, or just a line, kind of a character line. Like you're establishing the character of the dead mother. Like, I'm really surprised that so many people like.
Although
wow,
it made
she was
me
very
suspicious.
private. And then of course the smiling man.
Yeah. Who then shows up.
Who then shows up in the closet and the oh my god, the fact that
just the
he's smiling
imagery.
at Charlie and then you see him in the house smiling in the closet. Oh,
So
bleh.
creepy.
That was really creepy. That and the
Yeah,
the
some of these images, the red from the heat
space
lamps.
Heaters. But that sort of is beginning to really set up the character of Joan, who was one of these private friends that her mother had. But she seems so sympathetic, and just like she is there for her. But then when you see it again, you see how she's pushing Annie this whole time. You know, like she thinks she's losing her, and she's like, "I forgot something. I have to go." And she just goes, "My son died."
Yeah.
The first time you see it, you think it's like, no. We have this connection, and I have to help you. The second time, you're like, no, she just doesn't want to lose her. She has to keep. My son died, and this thing of just like, in between those two meetings, you see the seance thing being pushed into the mail slot with the mail already there, which shows you that it was her, pushing her towards the seance. Annie doesn't do it. Lo and behold, they run into each other. And at the art store, Joan's already there. You assume, again, it's working on assumptions. You assume Joan's been in the store. Of course not. She was sitting in the parking lot waiting for Annie to come out. It's like, oh my God, this is going to sound crazy. This seance You've got to do this. Then she and the demon do their little dog and pony
Yeah.
show. But the idea of like handing her
By the way,
this
that's an amazing way to
dog
frame
and pony show.
She and the demon get together and they
do this
an
whole
amazing
dog and
little
pony
dance.
show. But then the other thing that's in the book is it talks about the ritual. You have to do 2 rituals. One ritual unlocks the possession.
Yeah.
And another ritual
Locks it in. Yeah.
And I think that what she gives Annie is the ritual that unlocks Payman's possession, because immediately Peter says, "You didn't feel that?"
Yeah.
It's like the air flexed, and the next day is when he starts having visions. He starts seeing Joan saying, "I expel you, get out." That the way that she, under the guise of helping her, of being this nice lady, gives her this ritual, tricks her into doing this ritual that invites this spirit into their lives.
Yeah, but here's the other interesting thing about that is, once again, for Toni Collette's character, is that first of all, Anne Down is amazing, and I will never trust her ever again as any character. I'll always think she's Aunt Lydiaing us. But in that moment, she keeps pulling Toni Collette to look at her. Mm-hmm. Toni Collette keeps kind of trying to going like, almost at the audience, like, listen to this lady. And she keeps pulling her, no, I got you. It's really fascinating to watch the performance on both their parts. But she also, I wondered if the son and the husband were real.
I don't think they were.
You don't think they're?
No.
Because part of me was like, I wonder if they were also sacrifices in the continued attempt to bring Payman back. Or no, the son and the grandson, pardon me. It wasn't the son and the husband. It was the son and the grandson. Now, maybe not. Maybe that was just all so much smoke and mirrors in order to lead her along. But if she had been listening to herself, and here's the thing, she has so much damage, and she's been told so many lies, and she's been taught to not trust herself because she fears that she's going to go crazy. Like, you saw that place, you saw that mat.
Right.
Joni.
That should have been.
That should have triggered you. You shouldn't trust this woman. You went and you did the seance not knowing what the words are. Like, the degree to which this woman doesn't trust herself is what causes everything to unfold.
Right. Because she's been told her whole life not to trust herself.
Yeah.
She's been told her entire life, essentially, you're untrustworthy because no one in this family is trustworthy. So whatever's going on in your head, don't trust it. Don't trust your instincts. Don't trust. And again, it's just part of the long game that the movie and her own mother were playing to get her to undermine. And that happens to get her to undermine everything that she thinks or does or says. And that's the thing, is like the Payman being, it's kind of like a trickster. I forget what it was, the god of something.
It was like a trickster.
Yeah. But it does that. Like, it's even it manipulates people. It plays with them. Even Toni Collette throwing the book in the fire and then her catching fire. I know a lot of people say, like, well, why is it that when she throws the book in the fire, she catches on fire, but then when ultimately it's her husband that catches on fire? I think the demon knew that her husband would never do it, and that she would have to do it, thinking that she was going to sacrifice herself, and she throws it in, and who bursts into flames? It's her husband. And it's this idea of even the demon is playing games, is manipulating everybody and getting them to not trust their own instincts. I don't know. I love when movies have this kind of depth to them, in the sense that you can guess at motivations and guess at what things are doing and what things mean, but not in like there's a no answers way, in a way that's just like it's open to interpretation. You can interpret them however you want.
Some of them there are answers for, I think, and then some of it really is open to interpretation. It's operating on multiple levels, because again, this is the amazing thing about this movie. In the end, you're like, that demon is tricky and smart. But it's also that if people do grow up with that kind of family and that kind of dysfunction, they are taught their entire lives not to trust themselves, not to trust the truth, not to trust their own sense of perception, and that is a prison. And that becomes their own demons that they're fighting. So it does really function both ways.
There's one final little thing that's in the movie that I don't have an answer for. I tried to kind of suss out watching it again, but I wasn't quite sure, but I wanted to get your thoughts on, which is the words that are scrawled into the walls of the house. I think maybe because I was trying to listen to Annie's incantation when she was starting the ritual to what I think unlock Payman, so that he could then be free to fly around and go into Peter eventually.
So the square light thing is Payman, right?
Yeah. Because the other thing I noticed the second time is right after Gabriel Byrne bursts into flames, when Toni Collette is screaming right before she does that change in her face, the light goes right over her, and she just changes. So that's Payman, I think, going into her.
And then it goes into Peter.
And then she beheads herself,
Yeah.
which again we've kind of talked about in this world is a sign of release.
Yeah.
And it flies down and goes into Peter.
Right. And we had seen it go into Charlie in the early parts of the movie.
And it kind of
it would have been around her.
That's the thing. That's a great thing that's the light right there. That's what I love about the fact is that it doesn't go into Charlie. It kind of flits around her room, and I think that's a sign again of the fact that this is not a good fit.
Yeah, it's not
that this
working
demon
out.
is trying to imprint on her, and it's just not working. She's not the vessel it needs.
Right, and I think it's also what's made Charlie, and this is the other thing. It's what has made Charlie so
different,
odd, you know, and unique as a child. And they never. Here's the other fascinating thing: the family never addresses that. Never. They just refuse to look at it and keep wanting to force her to be something she's not. Anyway, go ahead.
But the words on the walls, I was trying to match it up. I think those words might be the words that have to be spoken to invoke this ritual. So again, I think perhaps either Grandma or Payman in some way manipulating was scrawling these words on the walls of the house, again, as a way to sort of get them ingrained in somebody's mind. That may be too literal. It may be more metaphorical. But again, that's just another thing, that a little touch of the small things in this movie that, you know, I like, that they put in these little touches for you to go like, I wonder what that is. I wonder what that means. And you're free to speculate about it.
I mean, I think there is a lot of stuff in this that's what's really cool about this, is that there is a lot that is literal. You know, that it's happening.
It's
this
actually
demon
happening.
is. But where I was curious at the end with Peter is there was a small part of me that felt like, are you possessed really by Payman? Now I'm curious to see where how you feel about this.
Sure.
Are you possessed really by Payman? Are you possessed by actual Charlie? And has it been that the human beings have been created this evil out of their desire for more, for gold, for power, whatever it is that they want in the end, riches, the things that everybody wants to some degree. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense. Is the evil the human evil, or is it the evil that's the human evil and this actual King of Hell?
I think it was both.
Yeah.
I think that Payman was imperfectly joined with Charlie.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why they address Peter as Charlie
Right.
at the end. It's because Charlie was the conduit.
Yeah.
And Payman inhabited her to some degree, and she was not right. And so I think they revere, this is why you see Charlie's head with the crown. I think they revere Charlie as the conduit, but Peter is now the real conduit. It's now kind of a meshing of, you know, Charlie is revered as the person that, you know, ushered Payman to this point, but now Peter is the vessel, the final vessel. They've corrected the body, and this is now, you know, the demon's home.
Or was Charlie at birth the incarnation, you know what I mean, Payman incarnate, so that her soul is also Payman, but she just it never really fully worked in the body.
I think the grandmother had to have had some influence, because if it was an at birth thing, then it would have been Peter from the beginning.
Right.
I think that's where the whole feeding and the grandmother's influence, I think there has to be some incantations, rituals, whatever the grandmother's doing to that poor child when there was a kid that puts Payman into somebody. But, you know, Peter's the ultimate vessel, the ultimate destination.
Oh my gosh.
There's
so much to unpack in this movie. There are so many things happening all at once. It is really, really, truly brilliantly made. In my opinion, it's really brilliantly made. To be able to be doing that much at one time, and it works, and it makes sense, and you have this incredible performance to boot.
Yeah. And it's a movie that's dense, but not inaccessible.
No.
Which I think a lot of very dense movies can be. So a lot of people, they become inaccessible, but they become so dense that in trying to find the meaning for things, people just sort of get frustrated and give up, because either it's not there, it's just sort of very abstract, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's very abstract, and the search for meaning is kind of pointless, or it's just so kind of obtuse that people just like, roll their eyes and give up. I love that this movie doles things out. It's a mixture of both. It leaves some questions unanswered, open interpretation. It provides answers to other questions, and then it kind of does a hybrid on some things. Like, I'll give you some information, and you can use that however you want.
Yeah, it does. And then you can go back again and pick up more and more clues. But the other thing about it that's really cool to me is that however you want to deal with it, you can. If you want to go to this movie and be scared, it is legitimately creepy. I thought I was going to have to leave.
Check the corners of your rooms from now on.
Yes, exactly. It was absolutely, that one. It's gorgeous, beautifully shot.
Yeah.
The shot design, as we've been talking about, is stunning.
Yeah.
Just the placement in terms of using fear, just the placement of where she is in his room and how long he just doesn't know.
It's worth seeing a second time just to play a game with the audience. I recommend sitting in the back.
When will
just
they
to
notice?
Because I was doing that last night. I was listening and watching to see when people.
Oh, I noticed right away. Did you?
I saw that there was something up there. But what I noticed, and smartly again, is it's so much of it is allowing an audience to just kind of find it on their own. But he does something very subtle, and it's another creepy touch, which is there's a shot of him sitting on the bed. There's the she's up there. You can see people ringed around the house from the beginning when it shows outside at night, which is also creepy and so subtle. But outside, he sees the window and the motion light, which they set up way early in the movie that they have a motion light. And again, it's like, why did they set that up? You just see the faint glow of the motion light, indicating that it's obviously a cult member walking around, which that's creepy. Again, the unknown, somebody's moving around out there. But there's the tiniest splash of ambient light on the reverse from that motion light that sheds just 10% more light on that corner for just a few seconds, and then it goes off. That again, that's just so brilliantly crafted as a way of like not highlighting that scare or pointing it to an audience, but for those that might not have registered it yet, giving them
the opportunity,
that extra little bit of information that will allow them to see that. And then I love the payoff to that scare being just that silent, wordless behind him.
So creepy.
So creepy. So much more effective than any jumps. And that's what I loved about this was I just watching it and was pegging where a cheap movie would have put the jump scares. When she sees her mother in the room, when she turns off the light, that's a jump scare. When she's on the wall, that's a jump scare. When the attic door opens, that's a jump scare. And the idea that like I think they have one legitimate jump scare in this movie when she walks out of the corner, and that's so much more effective.
Well, it's so much more effective, and it's also that its form is dictated by the story, right? So that look, when she turned off the light, when she turned on the light, I figure if she turns it off again, Mother's going to be there like blah, right? And this is why it's the perfect thing that she wasn't. Not only is that's more surprising and it's more engaged, what is going to happen as a viewer? You're left on even more unnerved and uncertain because this isn't a movie you can predict. But because the more scary thing is, did I see it?
Right.
Or am I going crazy?
Was that there or was it in her head?
Was it in my head or am I? Yeah, that's the more scary thing. And Peter, I think the other thing that I loved, one of the moments that I loved, is how he responds in the car and just looking in the rearview mirror and how subtly that is done, that we're on him as he hears his mother go down and fails to tell her what she's going to see. Hears her get in the car, hears her response, and then has to deal with the consequences of that grief. But that it shows just how repressed this family is, that he couldn't even tell them. He had to let her experience finding that, which is really kind of cruel. It's really a great movie.
It is.
Operating on multiple levels. You can also watch it as a family tragedy drama.
Sure.
And it works on that level.
Until the last 20 minutes, and then it's
until the last 20 minutes is an absolutely terrifying horror movie.
I know some people are speculating that all of this was in Peter's mind, or that it was all, none of the events happened, that it was all just kind of
I don't think
mental
so.
illness. But I think there were enough things that you saw that were out of, like, for example, the shot inside Joan's apartment, where you see all the ritual stuff. I think there are shots that the movie gives us that are outside of that subjective point of view that I think indicate that it wasn't, I'm not saying that that's a bad interpretation. I just think that I don't know if that may have been what they were going for.
I think filmmakers and artists and writers always say, and I think he has said this, and it's true, once you put it in the world, it's yours. So that's yours to interpret, and that's a perfectly valid interpretation for me. The way he was using the camera, the way he was playing with the dollhouse, and most importantly, the very first shot of the movie sets you into the position of an omniscient viewer, which tells you that you're actually not in their subjective point of view. You're watching the real things unfold with a cold, distant eye of an elder god. And there's not, you know what I mean?
It's not a Fight Club situation where you literally have an unreliable narrator.
It's not that. If we were in there, he's a smart enough filmmaker that if we were meant to be in their subjective point of view, he would have used the camera differently than he did.
Exactly.
And we would be, in my opinion.
I agree.
But I love that there's just a million different ways to read this thing.
Well, Roth,
we did it.
I think we were about as long as the movie itself. That's all right. I hope if you've seen Hereditary. No, we both do it. It's been a long time since I was able to talk about a movie for this long without getting angry about it. Or, wondering why it was playing with my emotions in the bad way. In
the good way.
In the great way.
Our emotions.
So, that's our breakdown of Hereditary. This is one of those movies. Please share your theories. Let us know what you agree with. Let us know what you disagree with. What were your interpretations? What do you think? Please, we want to know. Leave them in the comments below.
And Toni Collette for Oscar.
Toni Collette
for Oscar.
For all the Oscars. Please. And Alex Wolff.
For
Best Supporting.
This kid.
He was great in this movie. Everyone was great in this movie. But Toni Collette, I think, just from now till next March, Roth and I are going to make it.
People use the word tour de force.
Yeah. Such a great performance. Thanks for watching our very detailed spoiler breakdown of Hereditary.
Thank you for watching. We will see you next week.
All
the weeks, many weeks with more reviews.
We'll be back.
I hope we get a movie this rich with things to talk about in the weeks to come. But the conversation will continue. Talk with us on Twitter. Talk with us in the comments. Let us know your theories and thoughts and all of the things. I'm sure we even have more, shockingly enough.
Exactly.
And we will see you next week.